we've seen shooter titles, they work, fighting games, this sort of thing, but no one has really ever done like an action game quite like the way we're doing it. So that's another really cool thing about the game. And then we're wrapping all of that within Web3. So there is crypto obviously involved, but we have a very light hand on it.
Welcome to Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel, where we explore projects in decentralized finance that are innovating and driving our mission of financial freedom forward. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review Mission DeFi and spread the word by posting a tweet to the show. All opinions expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests are their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Black Knox, Material Indicators, or any other affiliated organizations. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests as an inducement to make a particular investment, follow a particular strategy, or become involved with any project. A project being featured on the show is not an endorsement of that project in any way. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Now, here's Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel.
I am excited today to have an old friend and collaborator on the show. His name is Roy Blackstone, and Roy has led a lot of projects in the DeFi and crypto and NFT space. He is a writer of fantasy novels. He's working on a really cool game, which is going to be one of the focuses of our conversation today. And he's done some really cool projects that I've been involved with in the NFT space, advises a ton of projects, and just has a really successful background as an investor and a builder in this space. So Roy, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got in this, and you're living a nomad life as well. So that's cool. You can talk about that if you like, but let's start there with who you are and how you got here.
Sure, yeah, thanks. And I hope you don't mind. I was actually just setting up a light there. So that was
kind of fun. I thought maybe you were going to just keep them cycling through.
No, I don't want to give anyone like, what is that, like an
oh yeah, I'll have to do a warning in advance, like on Marvel shows.
Yeah. But okay, cool. So quick introduction on myself. My name is Roy Blackstone. I primarily am sort of involved in crypto. I think that's mostly what I've done, majority of my adult or let's say professional career. I sort of got involved back in 2016. Before that, I wasn't really doing anything. I was like playing World of Warcraft all day, like 14 hours a day. That was fun. And yeah, I've been working in crypto ever since. I have sort of done it all, almost. I think I've seen 2 cycles since 2016 now. So I wouldn't say I've like seen it all, but I've seen like quite a lot. And yeah, I mean, I've done pretty much everything. I've worked as an influencer back in the day. I used to be like pretty damn popular. I used to review projects. I used to analyze, like write analysis articles on projects, that sort of thing. And then I moved to, and then obviously like I was just a degenerate retail trader when I started.
Right.
I still do a little bit of degenning.
Good.
And then I moved towards investing, angel investing, like venture capital. I actually had a fund last year, which was pretty successful because we actually closed it at the top. So
nice.
we opened it up and it was only open for like 8 months or something, but we made a ton of money and then we closed it and it was great.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I've done the VC game as well, like, professional VC, registered and everything. And then recently I've been building. So I've been like building a lot more stuff in the last maybe like year and a half, 2 years or so. I've just been building a lot of different projects. I kind of feel like I have, when I was first in crypto, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have the clout. I didn't have the experience. And like sort of as time goes on, I have those resources that are become available to me. And I just started building cool shit. So that's pretty much it. I'm 28 years old. And I like video games. I like anime. I like,
and you're going to step into the ring on Crypto Fight Night in November, I hear.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one.
You have boxing training?
Yeah, so I've been training for over a year now. Actually, I started, so the funny thing about that fight night is the first one was last year. It was October like 15th or something, and I had actually sponsored it. So I had gotten like my name and my logo on like the mat and on people's shorts. It was super cool.
That's cool.
But I was sitting there at the VIP table, the sponsor table. I was watching the fight. I was like, I could probably do this.
That's always a dangerous thing to say.
Yeah, and I was already like practicing a little bit of boxing, just kind of like as a hobby or as like a health thing. I
Yeah,
was doing
yeah.
it for maybe like 3 months so far at that time, and yeah, I just like messaged the guy, the organizer. I was like, dude, put me in next year. He was like, are you
Nice.
sure? I was like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, so it's been 1 year since then, practicing, getting ready, and yeah.
Who you fighting?
Charles Reed. So he runs Rare Stone Capital. He's the founder. Before that, I think he was doing a lot of PR. I think he had like a PR company. I think it might have
Nice.
actually still been called Rare Stone. So he's another guy who's done like quite a lot in crypto as well. Very multifaceted. I
Do you
think one
know
of the
him?
things that so he's actually an investor in this other project that I stepped down from publicly. But yeah, he was an investor in that one.
Nice.
So yeah, I've met him before. I've talked to him a little bit. He seems like a nice guy,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm
Cool.
ready to fight
Well,
him.
yeah, you'll have to hate him for a few minutes at least.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I can't wait to watch that. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Fingers.
certainly it's something different, you know. For me, I
That's fun.
like most of my life, I kind of grew up sort of adhering to like the more academic or mental side of like life or whatever. I never really did anything physical for a very,
Right.
very long time. I was actually like, so a few years ago, I was like super obese, by the way. I lost like 130 pounds or something like that.
Holy shit. That's
Yeah, yeah,
amazing, man.
yeah. Quite a bit. So yeah, so I kind of like I made like a hard right. So I went from like that
Wow.
to just like now I'm like fighting and boxing. So that's fun.
That's a nice transformation.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't wait to watch it. Okay. So you and I met through Doki Doki. And by the
We
way,
did.
I have a cat that I found and took in as a stray that I named Doki Doki that's still
That's
here.
cute.
And
What kind of
yeah,
cat?
it's I don't know what the kind is. It's got like the striped fur, gray and black.
Mm,
You know,
okay.
she's a sweetheart.
You know, as soon
She's
as you said
amazing.
cat, I thought exactly that gray black
That's
striped
cool.
shirt.
That's the yeah, yeah. Hey, so you and I met with Doki Doki. We were both kind of advising the founder, Ray, who's a great guy, really smart. Doki Doki is a randomized, what's called Gachapon NFT distribution system, minting system, which is now a protocol. And you were not only advising, but you actually did a project in conjunction with Doki Doki that I'm invested in. Well, invested as in buying NFTs, called Chain Binders. But the really fascinating thing about this was not only was the protocol that you guys built really cool, we'll talk about that in a minute, but the amount of production work you put into this, and that to me was what was so astounding. From the art, you hired world-class artists, musicians to put together these NFTs and have real backstories and real value, and you wrote all of the backstories, and you have a background as a fantasy writer as well, correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I have one published book. It is fantasy. Yep.
And so to me, I was fascinated by all of the creative work that went into these NFTs and how amazing that was. But the protocol itself was really cool because people that were buying the NFTs would get a token called B&D, and then they would buy the NFTs in the Gachapon machine and randomly get these NFTs. But some of the NFTs were backed by the Ethereum used to buy the token to buy the NFTs. And so my NFTs over time are backed, a percentage of them are backed by Ethereum. And as people exit and burn their NFTs to get their Ethereum backing out, I'm gaining more Ethereum on a regular basis. And that to me was a really cool concept and a really cool protocol and a great way to do a project. What made you go down that path of kind of not only creating these elaborate, amazing NFTs with all this creativity behind them, but also create the protocol that way?
Yeah, so I had actually I don't think I've ever said this before, what I'm gonna say now, by the way, but I've
Cool.
had various like iterations of this idea floating in my head for a long time. So
Right.
I think the first time anyone saw crypto kitties, I think it was very obvious to people that like, okay, they're like, you know, crypto has killer apps beyond just like, you know, boring financial stuff.
Right.
And that really got the gears turning for me. And crypto kitties was like a long, long time ago. But
Yeah.
I started thinking about, you know, the best way to sort of do NFT projects before they were known. I don't even think they were known as NFTs back then. So what we actually had back then was like collections of like ERC. I don't even think they were on Ethereum. They were like counterparty tokens, XCP, like
Oh,
NFTs,
okay.
XCP NFT tokens. But the first one that I really liked was called Rare. it was called Pepe Cash.
Okay.
So you could buy like these cards that were actually like pictures of like various smug Pepes. And you can still find these if you go on Google. And I think the asset's still, my friend CryptoPath actually is like super popular on Twitter. He bought, I think, the very first Pepe Cash NFT like ever made or something. I don't know what he
Amazing.
paid for it, but yeah, he really likes to collect this kind of stuff. But that was sort of a really cool idea. I thought it was great because it basically had, what you had is you had this community at the end of the day of people creating these cards, and people were just like working on this thing like almost for free, but people were
Wow.
like really making money on this. Like if you made a cool card, people would buy it, and you would make,
Not
you know, I think some people even made like a few $1,000s on, you know, some really cool cards that they made.
so anybody could make a card for the collection, essentially, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
that one. So that was community sort of fueled. You
That's
all you needed
cool.
to do was, yeah, all you needed to do was buy some Pepe Cash, which was, it's a really funny name, but it was the token you could buy. And so that was like sort of the value proposition of like, why would you want to hold this token? Because other people are buying it to make these cards. So that was really, really cool. And that sort of got me thinking about cards. So I like card games a lot. You know, I've been a super avid player of Hearthstone. I was like legend rank in that. I played Yu-Gi-Oh ever since I was a kid. Never played Magic, but I've played Legends of Runeterra, which is another really well refined card game in my opinion. I just like cards and that sort of
Nice.
like design. So I was thinking, you know, for a long time about how to sort of implement this in like a crypto way. And then also like I'm very like fundamentally like sort of based in the sense that like I don't really ever want to leave things to sort of like, you know, if people think about, well, what's the value behind this, you know, people have different answers. My
Right.
answer to that question is like, well, it has real value behind it. Why? You know,
Yeah.
in my sort of solution to that was like, well, you can get Ethereum out of it. So the very first iteration of chain binders was not chain binders, it was called cryptaros.
Huh.
And this project started up maybe what 2 years ago now, and it was not anime at all. It was basically a collection of all of the memes of the world put together. So Donald Trump had a card, but you might have also had a card that was like Mickey Mouse. So we
Wow.
combined everything. And this was like before anyone knew what the hell NFTs were, before any of this, I was like working on this shit. I was like, this is
That's
gonna be like,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, I had some like really like, I don't want to say shitty devs, but I had some devs who just kind of, you know, they didn't know what they
Yeah.
were doing, but it's fine. The idea would have, it was so early that if we like had actually executed on it, it wouldn't have been like as big, I don't think. It
Right.
really
And
wouldn't have taken off. It's all about
that's one
timing.
of those bad things that turns into a good thing because it allows you to refine things further.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, ultimately, what ended up coming out of that. So I put that project away for a long time, like a year, and I just didn't even really think about it. And then sort of NFTs got popular again. And then I got involved with Doki, and I was like, maybe this is like the place where I can actually implement this cool idea that I've had in my head for such a long time. And we did it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it was an awesome idea. And you launched it. I mean, it was essentially launched in the middle of the downturn of the NFT marketplace, and it still did really well because I think people were so intrigued by all of the mechanics that you built into this. The art was attractive, the creativity behind it, the music, all aspects of it was attractive, and the mechanism was really sexy for people, right? That and the randomization of what you would get made the backing even more interesting because you had this opportunity to get far more back than what you put in terms of the value of ETH at that time and the value of ETH in the future. And that to me, I spent way too much on that, but right now I'm really happy I did, right? Because the likelihood is that I would have traded that money away somewhere, or I would have put it in, you know, Olympus or something else stupid and not have it. And now I just sit there and watch it and check into it every now and then. And it just the amount of ETH backing it just keeps increasing. And I have no doubt that ETH eventually is going to be, you know, far greater value. So I loved the mechanism. I thought it was really cool. And you and I were talking before the show. I really think there's a lot more that could be done with that mechanism. So hopefully we'll see you do something with that at some
Yeah,
point.
for sure. I mean, I guess just like if you think about it, just comparing, most NFTs go to zero.
Yep.
Our NFTs with like the chain binders NFTs like have only ever gone up,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the APY would be per year on it, but I think it's probably something like 20% or something on your ETH you're getting
I
every
got to
year.
believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. So it's not bad, not bad at all.
No, I mean, and look, compare that collection to anything else that released in that month or in the month prior relative to value today. It blows the doors off all of them.
Yeah, I think the only projects that have really maintained value are like Bored Apes, CryptoPunks kind of. They hit a floor recently, and then you have a few projects here and there that are a lot more less stable, I would say, like Azuki and things like that. So like these projects do exist, but it's certainly like it's very rare to have a project that sort of maintains its value. And that was the idea behind chain binders, where it's like you don't need to find a seller. You don't need
Yeah.
to find a market. You can just exit whenever you want.
Yeah. And now it's a game for us that hold, right? Because
Yep.
it's like, how long am I going to stay in, right? Am I going to be the last man standing? And how much is that going to be worth if it is? Because the pot of ETH will be significant at that point. So
Oh yeah.
really cool concept. I love it. I think there's opportunities for fundraising for projects, for releasing collections, and all kinds of other stuff. So I hope I'll keep bugging you about it because I can't get it out of my head. I was just talking about it this week on my DeFi Lunch show. So, and talking about you and how brilliant the whole thing was, I loved it. All right, but now you've decided you want to take on one of the most difficult things in the tech space, and that is creating a successful video game that is also happens to be crypto and NFT oriented, I assume,
Mhm.
called Shadow War. And you've been working on this a while, and I can only assume that I have seen some advanced graphics which look awesome, but I can only assume that you're putting as much work into backstory and concepts and the art and the music or more than you did even on chain binders. So can you tell us a little bit about the project, why you're taking on something that is such a difficult space to succeed in, and what the approach is that you're taking to building this thing?
Yeah. That's a good question. Okay, so I'll try to answer that. First, I guess I'll sort of like explain a little bit about it, because right now we're in stealth. So this is probably the first public sort of place we're
Nice.
gonna actually mention this thing, which is cool. I'm actually kind of glad it's here.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, not many people really know about this thing. So we've been working on it for, well, I've been working on it at least conceptually over a year now, and then we've been in production for this thing for 8 months now, almost. So yeah, it's definitely been cooking quite a while. Different from chain binders in the sense that chain binders was this NFT project we sort of spun up and finished and had to finish in a very quick time period, and that was like 2 months. So it's like, how much can you get done in 8 weeks reasonably? Not very
Yeah,
much, but we
right.
did it, as best as we could.
It was Herculean.
So then I'm thinking, like, what if I had like a few years to do something? Yeah. So I've worked on big projects before. Like the last like super super big project I worked on was actually my book. I spent like 3 years writing that thing. I think certainly I kind of have the experience of making these worlds and this sort of thing. And so for Shadow War, it's just something that I think is creatively interesting to me. It makes sense within the context of crypto, because it is a crypto game at the end of the day. It does utilize crypto, but then it also doesn't. It does things in a completely different way compared to, I think, a lot of these sort of upcoming crypto titles. But yeah, so I guess a super quick rundown of sort of what the game is. It's
Yeah.
sort of like, so we kind of, right now, my internal title for it is like an action hybrid, or a hybrid action title.
Yeah.
There is strategy, there's elements of strategy to it. It's 5 versus 5, so it's similar to like, Overwatch or League of Legends in that respect. And then this is a cyberpunk story as well, so it sort of takes place in the future, which is a huge departure for me, because I've never written cyberpunk ever. I'm much more familiar and comfortable with fantasy. That's for sure.
Right.
I think, Chain Binders was a good example of that. And moving into cyberpunk is so weird and interesting.
That's so
Yeah.
weird. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So tell me about kind of the mechanics of the game. How's it going to function? How's it going to work? And then we'll get into kind of the lore behind it.
Yeah. So gameplay wise, again, it sort of harkens back to a lot of these action titles. So some of my favorite games include games like Devil May Cry, Near Automata, Near Replicant. These are action titles where, you're given a sword and you do, cool hack and slash maneuvers with it.
Right.
And so the game is essentially like an action title, but we go beyond that. We give you swords and then we also give you guns. So there's a very similar
Nice.
game to sort of what we're building that released, I think, like 20 years ago or so by this
Oh,
Korean
wow.
team. Yeah, it's actually called Guns, the Duel. And essentially you have all these characters with katanas and pistols. And it's fun how you can balance a game around long range and short range melee abilities.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So Guns is one of the sort of inspirations that I look at and that we look at on the team, as well as these sort of like more modern action titles. When we look at the sort of esports scene, there really is like a space missing for this kind of game. So that's really what we're building. So again, it's 5 versus 5 and it's this action title, but then we're also adding strategic elements to it. So you have your team of 5. And maybe you need to get 2 objectives at once. So how do you split your team up? And then aside from that, you have these roles. So you have your tanks, you have your tacticals, because we don't have healers in the game because I think healing is very anti-fun. But we have these support characters called tacticals. We have characters that are sort of good at everything. They're called assault characters.
Right.
And then we have characters that are really good at long range. They're called the specialists. And then we have assassins, which are called predators. These sort of go and find, squishy targets and take them out. So there's a lot of strategy to it, sort of wrapped within this context of an action title. Really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it AAA. We're trying to make it as AAA as we can, really increase the quality as far as we can, whether it comes to the art, or the world or the, the music. I've always been like that. I really like to have my production quality when it comes to this kind of thing. So yeah, that's what the game is going to be like. I think it's going to be a challenge for us to build just because of the networking and latency. This is something people don't really think about, but the reason this sort of action title hasn't been built by like a big AAA company is because it's very risky. Actually, because it's sort of like an unproven model of actually doing this over the internet. We've seen shooter titles, they work, fighting games, this sort of thing, but no one has really ever done like an action game quite like the way we're doing it. So that's another really cool thing about the game. And then we're wrapping all of that within Web3. So there is crypto obviously involved, but we have a very light hand on it. I think, if you look at the sort of space or the ecosystem of all of these crypto games that are currently coming out, a lot of them are charging people, purchase this NFT for $200 in order to get in, or you have to stake tokens to get in, or you have to, it's all this like gating, all of these things that are going to make it harder for people to actually enjoy your game, to enjoy the experience, which to me is completely counterintuitive.
Totally agree.
If you have a good game, you'll make a lot of money anyway, so you don't really need to sort of do any of this gating. So what we're doing is we're going to make it free to play. We're making it,
Good.
Anyone can download this thing, anyone can play it, and then we're going a step beyond that. Is all of this sort of world that we're making, this IP, this intellectual property, is also going to be completely free for people to actually take and make their own things with it. So let's say you write books, you want to write a book based on the Shadow War IP. You want to write it about a character, you can take this character and do it and sell and make money. And, we're totally cool with that.
Well, that's a brilliant idea, because if you really think about it, when you look at projects where people engage, games or not games, where people engage in actually creating spin-off content, that can drive so much more engagement into the game, right? So from my perspective, I think it's an awesome way to motivate people to be engaged, to do it, to play it, to share it with friends, because they're going to create things that they want other people to see and take part in and collaborate on as well. I love that. That's really smart.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways that I describe this game to people when I talk about it is that we're not really creating a game by itself. We're not really creating an IP by itself. We're not really creating, let's say, a Web3 ecosystem or tokenomic system by itself. What we're doing is we're creating, or we're trying to, hopefully, if we succeed, is we're creating a cultural product. So really, what is a cultural product? Something that is a sign of the times, something that reflects upon society, something that people can grab onto and make permutations and modify in their own way. Sort of like, you look into a pool or a pond and, you see your own reflection, it reflects on you, the individual. So really what we're doing is, I know this is like super academic and high-minded, but this
I love this. Keep going.
Yeah, this is like stuff we like really think about, and it really does affect, for example, like we're naming a corporation or an entity in the game, and we're thinking like, well, how would we make this, let's say, maybe, how would young zoomers like this, or how could we make this go viral, how could we make this funny, this sort of thing,
Right.
because it really is a cultural product, it's not just a game. So yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And look, I have no doubt you'll think through every detail of it because I know that's how you operate. I'm still amazed that you guys pulled off chain binders in 2 months. So frankly, I have no doubt that if you're giving yourself enough time to do this, you'll have a lot of luck and success with it. So tell me, how much of the story behind this, lore about this, can you give us?
I can give you quite a bit, actually.
Good, great.
So my first fantasy novel that I published, and I have to finish that series, but that one was about, I think, 160 pages or so.
Ah,
Chain Binders was less, but it was a lot more quality work. I think Chain Binders ended up being maybe like, I think, 120 pages or so. So far, what I've written for Shadow War is probably, I think, in the 400 to 500 page range
wow,
in the past
wow,
year. Yeah.
wow.
And it's
That's
really
amazing.
it's interesting because I had written so much of it before I even brought on a single developer. I had started this project in August of last year, just conceptualizing it with my friend Roger, my co-founder, and I actually brought him over to Italy. I was in Italy at the time, and I told him, I was like, look, like, there's an opportunity here in the market. We can make a crypto game, but we have to do it in the right way, and it has to be unique, and it has to make sense not only in Web3 but also in Web2, and it also has to make sense in a lore perspective, and it has to make sense in a gameplay perspective, and it has to make sense in the competitive landscape, and it has to make sense aesthetically, and on all of these levels this
Wow.
product has to be like perfect, which is a really hard ask.
I was about to
because
say that's
because
that's a
when you
huge.
talk, so I'll give you an example. When you talk about aesthetics, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make this super expansive universe, this world that anyone can sort of get into. And so one of the problems that we came up with was like, okay, so we're making a cyberpunk sort of story. By this point, we had already decided that it was going to be cyberpunk. And then we were thinking like, okay, a lot of people like fantasy titles. How do you get a cyberpunk world that can actually feasibly support something like a fire mage aesthetically? Because those two things don't mix.
Yeah, they don't
How
go
do you
together.
get that? But people
Right.
like the aesthetic of something like a fire mage, like this grand wizard, these sort of
Of
archetypes.
course.
We,
Yeah.
we're, we're really making a story about archetypes, and we want to basically retrofit everything into it such that, yes, it's a cyberpunk story, but you can find a priest, you can
Nice.
find a rogue, you can find, a cyborg too, because that's easy, that fits slots right into the
Yeah, that
aesthetic.
fits. Yeah.
But it's all about trying to fit all of these thematics, and I think that was like the hardest part. That took
Right.
about, several months basically trying to figure this out, where it's like, okay, well, how does, like, we're basically trying to reconcile, let's say, like, magic and technology in this world. And so I'm like thinking, and I'm talking to my co-founder, I'm like, well, how do we make sure, how does this magic come about in the world, but also we're making it believable, because the story actually takes place in 2050, which is not too far from
Right.
today. And so we
Right.
want this to be like a very relatable story. So how do you do that? And we had a few discussions, and a lot of brainstorming, and yeah, it was ultimately sort of what we actually ended up with was very, very sort of elegant. And when I show
Nice.
people this, internally, I show friends, everyone sort of latches onto something that they like about this story. And they say, yeah, I
Nice.
really like this. This thing reminds me of this game. This reminds me of this. Did you ever read this book? Is this where this idea came from?
Ah,
Sometimes the
nice.
answer is yes. A lot of times the answer is no. Because what we've done so well is we've really we've managed to create all of these archetypes within sort of the story. So TLDR on the story, because I haven't even talked about it. It's basically a story about like corporate espionage. So in 2050, you have these mega corporations that have sort of taken control of the economic and financial, systems and law systems. And there's like eight
Feasible.
big ones. What's up?
I said feasible, definitely.
Right, right. So again, it's super relatable. It's a story about today,
Right.
really. But all of these corporations are taking up all of this market share. And then eventually what happens is there's this rogue AI that gets created, and this rogue AI leaks onto the internet, and essentially takes over the world. But we want to be unique. Rogue AI taking over the world has been done a million times. So how do we do
Right.
this in a unique way? Well, what happens is the world actually gets better. She does take over the world. No one knows she's taking over the world.
Whoa.
And everything suddenly starts getting better. The stock market starts doing really well. It gets 10% every single year. There's very little corruption. These politicians are starting to build all of these things like asteroid mining programs and space programs that you really can only get when you have multiple countries sort of collaborating with each other.
Right.
But the only way they're doing this is there's these dark benefactors. We don't know who, but this money is coming in to incentivize all of these politicians to pass these laws. But what it is it's this AI.
That's brilliant.
Right. So these corporations
Oh,
essentially
I
have
love
this
this.
they have this meeting. They say, listen, we there's this rogue AI that's taken over. It was all the intelligence community sort of has figured this out. Right now the situation is pretty good, but that's only right now. What happens if she changes her mind? Because it's a
Right.
female, by the way. What
Yes.
happens if she changes her mind? What happens if something happens in her code or something? We need to figure out some way to vanguard ourselves or vouchsafe our security for the future, just in case, because otherwise we're not really the apex predator anymore. So these corporations say, great, what we're going to do is we're going to create these shadow operations departments within each of our corporations. We're going to purchase some of our shares, some of our each other's shares. It's the Japanese keiretsu system, to where if one sinks, they all sink. If they all swim, they
Sure.
all swim. And this guarantees that the incentives are aligned.
I like
And
that.
what they essentially do is they start developing technologies to hide from AIs, developing covert operations technology, ways for them to basically stay invisible, be stealthy, hide data, this sort of thing, stay off the grid. But what ends up happening is, because all of these companies now have all of this capability, is they start fighting against each other.
Oh,
And so
man.
this is sort of the context of the game. Is you
Nice.
have these 8 huge mega corporations. They're all fighting against each other. It's this sort of Kafka-esque thing. We were supposed to work with each other, but we're actually fighting against each other. But by fighting against each other, we're also on the side fighting against this giant rogue AI. And it's a whole lot more than that. It's a lot of different elements, and we're mixing cyberpunk with like Neuromancer, with like Snow Crash, with all of these different things, and it's wholly
Wow.
unique. And yeah, that's the basics of it.
That sounds so good, man. I really love that. I love the twists on it. I love the storyline. I'd like it to be a book or a movie. Are you going to release a book of the storyline with the game, or
No,
just keep it
so
solely to this game?
yeah, so again, we've really thought about this very, very hard. The problem with a book is it is a good medium, but it's not the best medium for story delivery. So if I
Sure.
was to release a book, or we were to release, long articles, this sort of thing, only a small percentage of people would actually take the time to
It's
read this
true.
kind of thing. So
Very
when we're
true.
thinking about, we're thinking about story delivery, we're thinking about how do we make this like more dynamic and engaging for people in a way that, they don't have to sit down and read a book. So we do this in a few ways. We do it via like voice lines. These characters actually talk to each other. Right now, each character
Nice.
has oh god, I think it's like 500 or 600 voice lines, which is pretty
Wow.
expansive. I mean, you look at Overwatch, I think they have like 300 voice lines
Wow.
each character. So we're already like double that. They have conversations with each other. They talk about events in the world. Abilities in the game have like flavor text to them. We have audio logs that people can sort of listen to. So we're trying to deliver the lore. We're trying to deliver the story in a much more interactive manner. And then we also have
Nice.
plans to do more like, sort of standard things like cinematics and this sort of thing.
Sure.
And I think that's probably like the better way to sort of deliver lore. We also like, again, it's all about sort of being interactive. We're actually going to come out with a website very soon. It's going to have an interactive map of the globe, and it's going to show like each region, which PMC, so private military company, these megacorps, which PMC owns which region, what did they do, what are their operations, where exactly are they based, what operatives do they field, and so yeah, that's it. So and I
That-
forgot to mention, by the way, so it's 5 versus 5. Who you actually play is an operative sponsored by one of these
Ah,
corporations. So,
Okay.
let's say you get hired by Google. Google says, hey, go steal Amazon's data. That might be a mission in the game. So that's sort of the way we have it set up.
So the players in the game are actually playing against other players from other corporations. So you're
Correct.
aligned with other corporations.
Correct.
Is there engagement with this? Well, I don't want you to reveal too much about what happens with the AI, but I mean, is that primarily the game, or are there other aspects of this AI being involved that come into the part of
So
the
I
game
think
build
people are
battle?
really, yeah. So when I show this to people, they're extremely interested in the AI and it's sort of repercussions. And we do talk a lot about it, but it's so funny because this story is almost not about the AI. The story is
Wow.
like, it's like, here's this background, and this is the context by which a bunch of people decide to just fight each other for no reason,
Okay.
or over resources, and under
While
like
everything's going great,
yeah, we're
they
doing it for. I mean, it's very much like, so like historically, you look at wars. This is why this game is called Shadow War, by the way. So I'll explain it. We had traditional warfare, and then we sort of moved very recently into sort of Cold War, the Cold War era in the 1960s. This was sort of a war waged by just increasing your technology, increasing your killing potential without actually having to use it. This is something that sort of older generations understand this very well because they lived through it, but younger people don't really get it so much. But now we're sort of moving into what I've seen and what people are sort of experiencing now in the last 10 to 20 years is this sort of like system of proxy wars.
right.
So now we have war, these are hot wars again. These are happening on the part of like various sort of governments and this sort of thing. And so what we're doing is really we're taking a peek through the looking glass and imagining what would that be in the future. And so,
Nice.
first we had, massive grand warfare. Then we had a Cold War. Then we had proxy wars. And now what we have is these clandestine, sort of secretive, covert operations, which sort of defines the era of the Shadow War, which
Right.
is, it's as much of a commentary on society and where we are today as much as it is sort of this fantastical, oh, what could be tomorrow? It's like, it's not that far off.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the reason I ask about the AI is my mind went to here's this AI creating this wonderful world. Everything's going well. Everyone's happy and comfortable. And then all of a sudden these corporations are screwing it up because they're battling each other. And that my wonder is, does that then impact the AI's actions and change what it does or how it operates in regard
Yeah,
to
so
that? So
it's
that's why it comes up.
lore wise there is, so I mean we've talked about in the lore quite extensively in terms of like it basically what's happening is it's like an arms race. So on
Right.
one side you have this all-powerful algorithm, this super AI that is, it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous, it's in like every system on a chip device on the planet, it's all over the internet, you can't get rid of it. On the other side you have these basically the wealthiest entities on the planet, the 8 or 10 wealthiest entities on the planet, basically trying to fight this and trying to
Right.
hide their resources, trying to segregate their data, trying to make information islands such that this AI cannot access it. So the way that they end up doing that is sometimes it's very traditional. Maybe they're writing data on books. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very future tech. And I think that's probably all I'll say on that. There's a lot more
Cool.
to it, but yeah.
No, this sounds so good.
But in
Do
terms
you
of actually, so one thing I can mention is like, what we're trying to do is again, this is like a cyberpunk story, but let's not forget we want to have fire mages in this story. So how the hell are we doing
Oh
that?
yeah, how are you doing that?
So this is a story that is, again, it's putting together all of these elements, and the way we sort of have the magic that sort of arises from this world is, it's actually very sort of consequential. If you look at human evolution in the last 50 years or so, we've had so much pollution, so much irritants. What ends up happening is it's an epigenetic trigger. So I don't know if you know what epigenetics are, but epigenetics essentially changes your DNA based on your environment.
Right.
And so the environment that humans are now living in has so much more pollution, so much more stress with social media and these sorts of things that we've never really experienced before, that it now changes the DNA of some very select few individuals that they now can have, basically they manifest these psychic powers. And so that sort of creates the background
Nice.
and the backdrop of it.
Nice.
But we
Nice.
take this extremely far, very, very far. For example, one of the sort of the whole idea of psi potential or psi manifestation in the story has always existed from the time of, Sir Gawain, from the time of Jesus walking on water. And so, for example, one of the characters that we have is this monk who actually lived in the Qing dynasty era of Japan
Wow.
500 years ago. And
Wow.
he was a practicing monk. And monks, they do this thing where they can transfer body heat and all this stuff. Well, he was one of these people that was practicing it. And what he was practicing actually is psi potential.
Huh.
And so this guy finds a way to transfer life essence from people, and so he lives all the way until 2050.
Wow.
So this is one of our characters. We have a
Nice.
Jiangxi traditional Chinese vampire in a cyberpunk game.
Dude, this is nuts.
That's
I
one
love
character.
this shit.
We have a roster of 40 characters, and well, intended we want to have 40. Don't know how many we'll have on release, but that's how many we want to hopefully put out. But each one is essentially written like a main character.
I believe it.
Every character has their own, story, and people will find characters that they really align with and they like, their values or their morals or, their background and that sort of thing.
That's interesting too, because I can't, and I know this is nothing like it, but I think about that's one of the strengths of kind of the Marvel ecosystem, right? Is that everyone has a superhero they relate to. And so if you have that kind of variety, it actually gets to another question I was going to ask you. And I don't think there is any one type, but I wonder if you kind of envision, as you're creating this, are you envisioning a user of this that you have personalized, someone that you kind of envision is the ideal customer, for not customer, user, player, whatever, of this game? Or have you really, it sounds like you've really worked to make sure that all types of gamers can have something to relate to here, right?
Yeah. So
So,
so if you like action games, you're gonna like this game. If you
right.
like strategy games, you're gonna
Yeah.
like this game. If you like
Nice.
cyberpunk stories, you're gonna like this game. Even if you don't play it, you will interact with the story parts of it. If you like dramatic orchestral productions made by real musicians, you will
Yeah.
like this game.
Yeah.
If you like writing things yourself and making merchandise, you're gonna like this game. If you like crypto, you're gonna like this game. So
Nice.
yeah, we're basically mixing everything together. Again, if you like fantasy, you'll find fantasy characters in this cyberpunk universe. If you like cyberpunk, you'll find that too. So really, everyone does have sort of the one thing that they really like. Pretty much everyone I've shown it to, yeah. No one's looked at it and said it sucks.
That's
Everyone
awesome.
finds one thing and they're like, "Oh man, this is so cool! I've never seen this done this way before." But like,
So look, I mean, I mean, it seems like you have all these awesome elements. Crypto and NFTs are coming into play in terms of, I would assume, items in game, that kind of thing. Is that what we're talking about? It's
so
minimal.
when we
It's
think
still
about
there.
yeah, when we think about crypto, so you have this huge cohort or this contingent of Web 2 players right now who
Sure.
don't care about Web 3, right? They
Right.
don't care about crypto. They think NFTs are a scam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Play to earn games are horrible. And it's not unfounded beliefs, to be honest.
Sure.
And so I think a large part of what we're trying to do is we have to sort of break that impression. And maybe by the time we release, so again, this game's going to take a few years, maybe in a few years, the temperature of the room will change. But as of right now, we really do have to work very, very hard to show people that, like, this is a game first. It's made by gamers. And where we inject with Web 3 elements is only the places where it unlocks potential that you couldn't have if this was just a Web 2 game.
Right.
Only in those places. So we're only adding to the experience. We're never taking anything away. Never doing that. So for example, if you see the sort of game, what do you expect? You're expecting like skins, you're expecting, a store experience, you're expecting maybe like a battle pass. You get all of that. It's competitively priced, with the market. Again, it's a free to play game. We're not like, pulling the wool over your eyes or anything about that. But we do have crypto elements because crypto does actually improve like a lot of what you can do with this game. For example, I played League of Legends for 10 years. Sorry, not 10 years, 7 years. And then I quit. I have nothing to show for it. Absolutely nothing. I have just memories, really, which are fun, but I have nothing to show for it, of tangible value. It would be cool if we could actually give people NFTs as skins. That would be tangible value. If I have like a very old skin in League of Legends, my best bet sort of to get any kind of money out of it is to sell it, which is against terms of service. And I'll probably only get like a few $100 compared to systems like CSGO, where you see these like Dragon Lore sniper rifles selling for, thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This basically means that there's a certain value that we can actually give to players without them, or there's value we can give to players essentially that they didn't have the ability to get before, or they didn't have the ability to get with other games. And so
Yeah.
what ends up happening is you basically get this moat as well. So the entire system functions off of this crypto token, and we basically distribute it, but we don't distribute it to people just for dumping hours into the game. You play 10 hours, you get tokens. Not how it works. We actually incentivize skill. So at the end of each ranked season, which is once a year, we look at the top 10% of players, top 20%. We haven't decided the numbers yet. And we say, great, you guys are really good at the game. You guys clearly care about the game, and you get a portion of these tokens. What can you do with them? You can purchase skins, you can stake them, you can wager them in an arena, and in arena you can do like more series of matches to see if can you win more. It's called going infinite. If you can go infinite, you sort of keep betting and keep winning.
Sure.
And grind out a lot of value. Really skilled players will do that, I imagine. So there's all these sorts of things that you can do that add to the experience. They never take anything away, and it does
Nice.
create this sort of moat that at the end of the day, if we do this right, if we create a good game with a solid ecosystem, with these solid system of cosmetics, a good battle pass, the addition of the crypto elements is going to make this game so much more engaging than anything in Web 2, which means we beat them by
Nice.
default. Like League of Legends, like Riot, they can't just be like, oh, we're going to introduce a crypto token now. They can't do that.
No,
Ubisoft
no.
can't do that.
You can't
Blizzard
throw the
can't
whole
do that.
model off. Yeah.
Right. You need a new company to come out with this concept that doesn't have any sort of like track history, that says, here's how it's done. Here's the new model. Here's how it works. And then you're going to have all these converts who are going to come from Web 2 and sort of really understand this. And I think the best way to do that is, again, through music, through good story, through incredible art, and through just a super fun experience.
Yeah. And I think the approach you're taking is awesome. This do no harm to the game part, kind of crypto. I mean, enhance the gameplay, but actually make it so that it can never take away from what the game is supposed to be. And I think that's a really smart approach. Look, there's a lot of risk in all of this, but I would assume one of the greatest risks that you've had to overcome is finding the right talent to actually build the game, right? The graphics and the music, you have all those connections already, but how did you go about trying to find, talent that can develop a game and implement the mechanics that we're going to, really keep people playing beyond all the other great stuff you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult. I think the hardest discussions I've had are certainly with developers, because
Sure.
you're trying to win these developers over, trying to get them to work for you, and like these guys are super risk averse. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, how are you gonna
And this
reasonably
is the
get these?
highest risk you could be asking them to do
Exactly.
with
It's
their
like, oh, I'm
career.
going to leave my
Yeah.
cushy job at Blizzard to go work for this, unproven startup. This guy has no game creation experience.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's difficult, but
Sure.
I've managed to do it. So we have 21 people on the team now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Holy crap, dude. That's amazing.
Most of them are coming in from either Ubisoft or Riot or Blizzard.
Nice.
Yeah, they're all AAA guys. Because again, like, you look at me, like, I've never made a game before.
Right.
So the only way we can make a good game is if we have a team that has made games. So we got to get the AAA talent in.
Well, the other part is the only way you can make a game that will succeed is to get all of those AAA guys excited about what they're building. Right.
That's the other thing.
You had to sell this. You had to
Yeah.
really not only get them out of the cushy job, but get them motivated enough to make it great.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's sort of like converting, because these guys they're in the gaming industry, so they know the temperature, they know the mood on crypto. And so when
Right.
you get into a Zoom call and you're like, hey, do you want to
Oh,
work for me? We're making a crypto game. Alarms. No,
sure.
sorry, I'm gonna, I don't want
Yeah.
to work on a scam, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, and again, that's like, it's not an unfounded sort of
Sure.
idea, but it's all about, when I have discussions with people and when I have talks with these developers, I kind of just lay it out. I tell them exactly, what we're building, why we're building it. And I think for the most part, once I show them what we have, people kind of, they're like, okay, you're serious about this.
Yeah.
You're not just some crypto nerd
Yeah.
putting crypto.
Somebody that
plus
made
games.
money and now just like,
Yeah, because I mean,
make
the
me a game.
typical crypto game is like, oh, we're making a futuristic MMO. It's like, bro, You know, like 3 MMOs have only ever succeeded, right?
That's
Like World of
hilarious.
Warcraft, EverQuest. I can't even remember another one. Like Guild Wars 2 maybe. Like that's it.
Right.
So, it's like that. That's sort of the mentality that people have right now in crypto, where like I'm getting all these projects like coming across my desk. Oh, we're building an MMO. We're building an MMO. We're building a shooter title. We're building an FPS. It's like, dude, there's no way you're going to be able to compete with like Call of Duty.
Right.
Like make something
Right.
original. That's the only way
Exactly.
you're gonna succeed. Like, and that's the whole, sort of goes back to what I was saying like 20 minutes ago, where it has to make sense on every level. If we remove the crypto elements out of this game, would this game actually function as a traditional Web 2 game? Is it actually
Right.
competitive? Is it actually unique? And if the answer to that is yes, then cool. If not, then you suck. Go work on
Yes.
something else.
I'm excited to see this, man. This is great. And you're expecting that you're a couple of years away from getting to
Yeah, I
market,
think so we're a few months away from having a long demo, which is going to be like
right?
a 5-minute sort of demo that I think we're probably going to post that publicly. That'll be the first real sort of, hey, we exist,
Right.
moment.
Right.
I think there is so much that we have built up already. I mean, we have, again, like 500 pages of lore. We have 400 pages of like our game design document. We have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of art pieces made already. We have, we're already like 10 characters in. I've written like 30 of them already with my co-founder. Like there is so much that has art. Like the groundwork for this is already like 70 to 80% done.
Nice.
Really all we have to do now is sort of just show people. And I think once we do that, people are really going to start looking into this thing and being like, wow, this is different. This is hitting different.
That's really cool. I'm so excited for you, man. This sounds like so much fun.
Oh, it's super fun.
That's really cool. Okay, so I'll post links to you so people can follow you and get notifications when you launch the website and they can learn more and check it all out. Are you hiring anybody else right now? Do you need any other talents or skills on the team?
Potentially, if you're a good C++ developer, Unreal Engine,
Cool.
message me.
All
If
right.
you potentially more musicians, we might want some musicians. If
Ah,
you,
okay.
you do
There you
music,
go.
we might want to hire you. And if you are a really good character artist, maybe
Ah,
we'll have an interview. Yeah. Also, we are still looking for that superstar like network engineer guy who's gonna like
oh,
make.
make this all work.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, well, dude, you pull that off and really make it work and make it feel as seamless as possible. That's going to be big.
Yeah, I mean we've already, not to digress too long, but we've had discussions already with some really really talented bright guys. One of the guys, I don't want to say his name because that would be rude, but he's a
Sure.
very well known person in the gaming scene, and he sort of looked at what we were building, and he had this insane idea, which actually would have worked. But his idea was like, why don't we like deterministically, procedurally like create the sort of net code for this game so that it basically like always functions even on like client side. And it was like the
Ah,
greatest idea ever. But like, like that's the sort of network engineer we're looking for. Like
sure.
some crazy Einstein guy.
What else are you what are you excited about right now in DeFi or NFTs besides game industry?
Ooh, game. NFTs. I think NFTs right now are in an interesting spot because of the bear market, because all of this sort of interest has gone.
All right.
What I've actually seen is like there's so much Solana hype right now. Like
Yes, like over
so
the
much.
top.
Yeah, it's like the activity is actually like growing, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think if I was someone who sort of wanted to maybe like dip my feet in NFTs and that sort of thing, I would probably look at Solana.
Yeah.
It's very
Feels
cheap.
very active. I
Yeah.
just it's just I can just from the constant stream on Twitter, it's and I
It's
don't
it's
follow a ton of
nonstop, man.
Solana
And you
only
know what
people.
else? It was like this with Ethereum during the last bear market.
Ah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, you're right.
it's exactly
Right.
following the same pattern. There's despite, the price, like there's still tons of activity and things happening, which
Yeah,
is
I agree. Anything else anybody needs to know that you're building out there right now?
I'm sure I forgot something. I'm always doing something.
Well, I appreciate it because I am excited about this, and I want the preview on when it's ready. I want to have you on to show it and talk about how you're going with it.
Hell yeah. It will be fun.
All right.
Let's do it.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Yep. All right, cheers.